Okay, what if you could actually map a political leader's core logic, but with geometry? It sounds a little out there, I know, but today we're diving into a really unconventional framework that claims to do exactly that, creating a kind of structural blueprint for what makes a leader tick.
So, where does this whole idea come from? Well, the source material we're looking at today is from a unique school of thought that applies geometric models to political psychology. We're going to walk through its specific analysis of Donald Trump to see how it claims to map out his core decision-making engine.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at what this model says makes this leader's psychological fingerprint a total one of a kind. Then, we'll get into the actual building blocks of the theory. From there, we'll explore the main event, a clash between power and logic. Then we'll see how this whole structure is predicted to change under pressure, and finally, we'll look at a pretty stark warning it has for 2026. Let's get into it. Right out of the gate, this analysis makes a really bold claim. It says that the subject's psychological structure isn't just a little unusual, it's a complete anomaly among modern leaders. We're not just talking about bending the rules of political geometry here. We're talking about a system that seems to be playing on a completely different field. So what makes this signature so unique? Well, the theory boils it down to 4 key traits. First, this intense, almost total opposition between the drive for power and the use of logic. Second, a very direct pipeline from gaining authority to making money. Third, a system where authority is built on pure personal will and branding. And finally, when you add it all up, you get a structure that just naturally operates at an incredibly high level of risk.
Now, to really get what's going on, we have to understand the 4 core drives this whole theory is built on. You can think of these as the fundamental forces that shape everything else.
First up is authority. You'll see a character on the slide. The theory adapts some terms from a traditional Chinese system. But for our purposes, authority is just the drive to set the rules, to gain status, to have executive power. You know, it's that core desire to be in command.
Next, we have wisdom. And in this model, this is the force of logic, of objective reason, of planning based on actual data and experience. It's basically the capacity for rational, strategic thinking.
Then there's wealth. And this isn't just about money. It's about the drive to pile up any kind of tangible resource, any asset, any material advantage you can get your hands on.
And last but not least, impression. This is the engine of self-will. It's all about personal branding, reputation, and that deep need for recognition. It's the drive to project a really powerful self-image. So, how does all this connect? The analysis says there are 2 main energy flows in this person's innate structure. First, impression is used to create authority. Basically, personal brand and sheer force of will are used to gain power. Then, that authority is used to generate wealth. It's a pretty direct power into cash pipeline. Okay, so we've got the pieces. Now let's see what happens when they interact. This brings us to what is easily the most dramatic finding in the whole analysis, a core internal conflict that defines the entire system. Get this, according to the model's calculations, there is a massive 173.8-degree angle of opposition between the drive for authority and the drive for wisdom. I mean, that is almost a straight line, a perfect 180 degrees of conflict. This puts them in what the theory calls a destruction mode. They don't just disagree, they actively try to cancel each other out. Yeah, this seesaw visual really nails it. The model is basically arguing that this psychological structure just cannot handle power and logic at the same time. When the drive for authority goes up, the capacity for objective wisdom has to go down. It's a zero-sum game. They are fundamentally mutually exclusive here. And the source material doesn't mince words. It puts it this starkly. This fundamental conflict is framed as the absolute key to understanding an approach that is, by its very nature, anti-establishment, anti-expert, and deeply suspicious of any kind of traditional, data-driven advice. Okay, so that's the innate blueprint, right? The factory settings. But of course, structures don't exist in a vacuum. So now, let's look at the really fascinating part, how this model projects that blueprint will evolve when you put it under the specific environmental pressures of late 2025. This table is where we see that contrast play out. It compares what the theory calls risk scores. Just think of any score over 100 as being in the critical red zone. So as you can see, authority risk stays really high. The wealth access actually gets stronger, it becomes more of a solid foundation. But the headline here is impression. Its risk score leaps from a pretty stable 79 all the way up to over 102, blowing past that critical threshold. This chart really drives that point home. It's a huge jump. And according to this theory, when that impression access, the personal brand, gets this over-leveraged, it means the leader's public image becomes a primary source of instability.
It's no longer just a tool for getting power. It becomes a catalyst for intense social polarization.
And all of this leads to a crucial strategic pivot. The model suggests the core logic of the whole system will shift. It's no longer primarily about leveraging personal brand to get power. The structure now moves to leverage hard assets, resources, its financial foundation, to secure and enforce its authority.
So you take the innate blueprint, you see how it evolves under pressure, and it all comes together in a pretty sobering prognosis from this theory for the year 2026.
The source has a specific name for this projected state: structural brittleness. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It describes a system that might look incredibly powerful from the outside, but it has an extremely low tolerance for error. It can't bend, so it's vulnerable to breaking.
So what makes it so brittle? The model points to three main things. First, you've got two major drives, authority and impression, both running hot, way into the danger zone. Second, that wisdom axis is still a complete no-fly zone, meaning there's no internal system for logical, database course correction. And finally, you put that all together, and you get a structure with almost zero margin for error, which makes it incredibly vulnerable to a single major shock.
And that leaves us right here, with the final, really provocative question this analysis raises. Is a structure this brittle, running this hot, and essentially flying blind without a logical compass, is it just destined to collapse? Or has its very uniqueness somehow allowed it to rewrite the geometric rules of modern power? That's the big question we're left with.